And loading. All right, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Lots to talk about today. It could be a long show because we do have a full crew. Saturday is Earth Day, so I thought dedicating this episode to a number of climate and energy related topics would have been that have been popping up recently would be pretty appropriate. We're going to be talking about different protests. We're going to be talking about the propaganda that's coming out. We're going to be talking about authoritarian policies out of the UK, New York, California, and all these stories taken together, going to paint a picture that the climate cult is getting crazier. We're going to be talking about all this and more in episode 394 of the In the Tank podcast. That's right. We had to change up the intro music again because YouTube will not relent on the music that we have paid for our normal intro. But whatever, that's beside the point. I'm sure that has nothing to do with anything. But yes, anyways, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I'm your host, as always, Donald Kendal. Full crew I've got, like I mentioned, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing great. It was my honor to fill in, I would say ably, but probably not as good as you. Obviously not as good as you. Even my own mother prefers you hosting the show instead of me. So, but I did do finger guns in the beginning. You know, I just wanted to make sure that you were there somewhere. Yeah, that's right.
That's the most important thing.
Jim, don't be an ableist.
Oh, nice. Good reference. That was Chris Talgo, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing good, and I am not an ableist.
There's my little boy in the background right here.
There we go.
Also joining us, we got Justin Haskins, director of the Socialism Research Center at the Heartland Institute.
Hey guys. So if I pass out in the middle of the episode, it's going to be because my wife has mandated on high, like an empress, that I am no longer allowed to have a chair in the office for half the day every day. Because I'm having neck problems, so I have no chair. I'm standing. I'm going to do the entire show standing, like I'm doing some kind of a Netflix comedy special. And hopefully I don't die in the process of this. But if I do, or, you know, there's just no one here at some point, it's probably because I passed out. I'm already exhausted. I think I've been up here for about 10 minutes, so that's not a good sign.
You should be sure to. You should take advantage. Be sure to move around. You know, walk to the back. You know, go back and forth. You know?
I agree. I'm gonna get one of those. I'm gonna get one of the handheld mics. That's what I should do, and then I can walk around and talk. You know, that's really that. I mean, that. Tell me that wouldn't be entertaining. That would be much more.
Yeah, that's how you should definitely do it. That's how you should definitely do it. You should have one of those GoPros attached to you so you could walk anywhere around your house, and we always get a good, nice picture of your face. Anyways, before we get going, I always have to put that message out there for all the audio-only listeners that are probably catching the show on a Friday or later. You can join us a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time, where you can watch us live, where we are streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and Twitter, and you can join the conversation live, throw your comments and questions in there. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Also, we have that super chat function if you want to help out the show by throwing us a couple of bucks, maybe attach a question on there, and we will be sure to read your question if you use that super chat function. Also, if you want to help us out, you can just by doing a couple of things that won't cost you any money, hitting that like button, subscribing if you haven't already, sharing this content, or just leaving a comment under the video. All helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Well, as Jim mentioned, I am back in the saddle. He covered for me last week after, I was welcoming into the world my second boy here. So you guys miss me? Anyone? Crickets.
Not really.
All right. Yeah. Well,
I missed you, Donnie.
I
actually wasn't here, but if I had been here, I would have missed you.
That's right. Justin had like a sniffles or something. He couldn't make it. So, yeah.
I was on death's door, but thanks for minimizing my illness.
So we got a lot to get to. So I want to jump right into it. Like I mentioned, it's Earth Day. There was a whole bunch of different topics, stories that kind of came across my desk that highlighted two major things in the climate change movement: the growing level of cognitive dissonance and a growing level of open authoritarianism. So I was, thinking about these stories and how they relate, and kind of grabbing other stories, and I was really thinking, you know what, all of these stories taken together are really making this whole thing look like a climate cult, if it hasn't already. And I'm sure there's plenty of people on the show, Jim, that will say that, oh no, we've been in the climate cult territory for a long time. And I personally have been hesitant to kind of use this terminology in the past, but I'm using it now. I think we are well past that threshold. So like I mentioned, bunch of stories I want to touch on in this discussion, but there's one that I want to start off that really irked me. And this was the one that really put me over the line of like, you know what, this is a cult. And the story is actually a trailer for a movie. And the title of that movie is How to Blow Up a Pipeline. So I think we have a slightly altered version of this trailer, altered, just kind of sped up a little bit. But I want to go ahead and play this trailer for us because this just blew me away. I'll save my comments for after, but go ahead and play that trailer.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Boom Talk. Today, teaching myself to make a homemade blasting cap. If this works, it'll be step one, making our own improvised explosive.
Might be headed to Texas for the winter. What's in Texas? It's a project. What kind of project?
Terrorism.
To stop the pipeline from being built on my property. Poisons the air, water.
Damn, this place is sick. You guys cooking match in here?
You ready to start working?
We have to show how vulnerable the oil industry is by hitting something big.
Michael, what do you think the odds are Ebola sound?
I don't really care.
What a badass.
We can blow the pipe at the hilltop. Keep the oil from leaking.
You're not actually thinking. I'm not thinking about it. I'm doing it. What if y'all do structural damage? Structural damage.
Don't need to think, just act.
This is destruction of federal property. Terrorism.
American Empire calls us terrorists, then we're doing something right.
If you're seeing this, let those who profit from mass death know their properties will be trashed. 3, 2, 1. They will defame us and claim this was violence, vandalism, but this was justified. This was an act of self-defense.
Yeah. We need to blow up pipelines for self-defense. All right. This is a movie of our generation. So this movie actually just came out like a week and a half ago. The New York Times wrote a review about the movie where they explain how the movie is squarely about eco-terrorism and that, quote, the movie treats this perspective with sympathy, respect, and even makes it a strange kind of cultural landmark. That's the way that the New York Times described this. So the movie is based on a book by the same name, authored by a Swedish professor of human ecology and an advocate of terrorism, Andreas Malm. In his book and elsewhere, Malm has promoted sabotage, property damage, and other terrorism to help fight against climate change. The movie was produced by the film production company Neon, who also produced movies including I, Tonya and Best Picture winner Parasite. And I want to make something like very clear about this. The point of this movie is to lionize the eco-terrorists. So I recall a movie that came out a couple of years ago. Jim reminded me it was called The Hunt. The plot of this movie a couple of years ago was about liberals hunting conservatives for sport. It was like the most dangerous game, right? The most dangerous game was a take on that. And it sparked a bunch of controversy because it was lost in translation, I guess, that the liberals were the bad guys. That movie wasn't trying to promote liberals hunting down conservatives. It was just some weird outrage that happened. That's not the case with this movie. Like the New York Times review states, the perspective of the terrorists, they're treated with sympathy and respect. They are the good guys. That's the point of this movie. So the movie, like the book it was based off, is intended to encourage this type of behavior, eco-terrorism, to fight against climate change. It's absolutely disgusting. But I wanted to start off that because this is the level that we are currently at when it comes to the climate change debate. Openly encouraging eco-terrorism. Unbelievable to me. But Jim, I want your thoughts on this first.
Well, I just thought it was really funny. Look at all the making out going on in that. Apparently, there's a lot of romance to be had in the radical environmental terrorist group, and it just goes to show that since the 1960s, man, lefty chicks are easy. And so, if that's probably how half the guys get involved in these things in the first place.
Right? Yeah,
But-
yeah. Fighting climate change, that's secondary.
Yeah, man, this is for chicks. But look, are we really surprised? I mean, you mentioned at the top. I've been calling this the climate cult for a long time. I'm glad, as usual, I'm ahead of the game, especially ahead of you, Donnie. You have to come around, and eventually you come to see things my way. So I'm very appreciative of that. But look, this is where we're at. The climate cult has such cachet in our culture that you can make a movie in which eco-terrorists are the good guys. And the destruction of property and harming people, and the reason this movie is made is because it's reflective in our society. In Britain right now, the Just Stop Oil outfit, the Extinction Rebellion was born in Britain too. There's a lot of eco nuts stuff happening in Britain, but even Extinction Rebellion, I think they announced like 6 months ago or so that they were going to kind of tamp down some things. We're gonna cut back a little bit on our environmental activism that disrupts everybody's lives and destroys property and all that stuff. So now Just Say Oil has jumped into the game, and they're the ones that are now stopping traffic on bridges. There's people in an ambulance and they can't get to the hospital. Oh, too bad. I guess you have to die because we have to save the planet. Things like that. We have clips of other radical nut job, direct action, as the left calls it. But that's why a movie like this is made, because this has been mainstreamed. It's been celebrated by the media globally, and that most of the people that control our culture are climate cultists. So of course they're going to try to do all they can to advance that cult in every way they can and in everywhere they have power.
Yeah, Chris, you watched it. You told me before we went live that you thought this was a joke at first and didn't realize that it was a trailer for an actual movie that was promoting eco-terrorism. But no, it's very real. Do you have anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah, well, first of all, silly me for not believing that this thing was real right off the bat. And also, stupid me, because I do watch, a lot of stuff on Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max, and some of the other big streaming services. And I know that this is not a streaming service movie. This is actually going to be put out in the theaters. But one thing that I've noticed, and especially the past, 2 or 3 years, the wokeness, the obsession with the climate, with social justice in every single movie and TV show, it's never ending. So it doesn't surprise me that Hollywood would produce an entire movie in which they're saying it's good to blow up pipelines, because in Hollywood, the ends always justify the means. And I also wonder if this is, just a way for them to get a little bit of cover, because we all know that the hypocrites in Hollywood are not the ones who are going green, who are giving up their private jets, who are giving up their, SUVs and all this stuff. So I think this is a way for them to kind of like say, like, wink, wink, nod, nod, like we're on the good side here. We are the good team, while they, don't actually do what they say that they are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, Justin, I mean, it just seems bizarre that we're at this point where this type of thing could just be so openly, like there was a lot of talk a handful of years ago when the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 12 was wrapping up, and Thanos, the big bad guy, was, for ecological reasons, was trying to wipe out half of the world's population. And it was like, we pointed at it, it's like, oh, see, this is like, what these people somewhat believe, but he was the bad guy. These guys are the good guys. How are we here? Is this reflective, I guess, of the culture, or am I reaching a little bit?
It's reflective of the culture that is with younger people. I think there is a degree of young liberals who truly do believe what they've been told over and over and over again by many different people for their entire lives, which is that the world is on the brink of completely collapsing, that we're all soon going to die if we don't stop a climate crisis. And if you really believe that, then why wouldn't you blow up the pipelines? I mean, if you think of carbon dioxide as a poison, that is floating up into the air. Like if we actually imagine that that's what it is, it's actually a bunch of people. Like if we imagine there are all these businesses and these businesses were pumping poison up into the air or putting it into everyone's water supply everywhere in the entire world. There's nowhere to escape. And we were all getting cancer from it. Okay. And we knew this for a fact. We're all getting cancer from water at the age of 40, that because these companies are pumping it into the water supply. And the government isn't doing anything about it because they're corrupt and they're in bed with these big businesses. And we all knew that. I mean, this kind of stuff seems much more reasonable. Sure. And that's exactly the mindset that a lot of these people have. And what's scary is we know for a fact that older generations of people, like say 40 and above, that the vast majority of them, even the ones on the left, don't really believe that this is actually an existential crisis. And we know that because they've never lived their lives as though that were the case.
Sure.
And they just never have done it, right? So when Al Gore talks about it being an existential crisis while he's flying around in his private jets and multiple mansions, these gigantic mansions and all this stuff, driving around his gasoline powered car, like we know that he doesn't actually believe it. When Barack Obama builds a mansion on an island, Martha's Vineyard, near the beach, we know he doesn't think that sea level is going to consume everything. When big banks and insurance companies are financing homes being built on the beach in Malibu, California, we know they don't actually believe it's a crisis. When they're doing business with China, one of the biggest emitters of CO2 emissions in the world, we know that they don't actually believe it's a crisis. So we know those people don't actually believe it, really. But a lot of younger people, they do. They've been radicalized into thinking that this really is an existential crisis. And so what's terrifying about that is logically, this actually makes sense if you buy the underlying premise. Why wouldn't we? This is like akin to Oscar Schindler, right? This is like we're violating the law. We're going against what government says, but it's to save Jews. Like that's basically what these people, that's how they see themselves.
Right.
So it's that underlying assumption, which is why Heartland has spent so much time over so many years talking about this issue. The underlying assumption, if it actually is believed universally and taken to its logical conclusion, you get blowing up pipelines, you get, authoritarianism, throwing people in jail because they work for a fossil fuel company or for an organization that said that, we should have the most affordable energy like the Heartland Institute, and not just have wind and solar. Like that's the logical outcome of that way of thinking.
Yeah,
so, I mean, it may actually, in a way, I'm surprised it's taken so long, in a way, right? I mean, truly, if you believe we're all going to die, then blowing up pipelines isn't that big of a deal.
Well, it's just that this trailer and the guy that wrote the book that this movie is based off of, they are encouraging people to become literal martyrs in this holy war of theirs against climate change.
Right.
Sounds pretty cult-like to me. So, like I said, the accusations of cult-like behavior have swirled around for a while when it comes to climate change. And I was like, maybe it's like, maybe they're reaching a little bit. But now it's like, it's almost too on the nose. Other times it's too on the nose. Do you guys remember the NBC, when NBC did their Confess Your Climate Sins project?
Oh, God.
Where they had a website where they encouraged people to go to the website to confess their actions that you do personally that negatively impact climate change. Or do you remember when Mayor Pete compared inaction to climate change to sinning? He said it was like a type of sin. Or when comedian Sarah Silverman compared Greta Thunberg to the second coming of Jesus. Do you remember these things? Like, it sounds kind of cult-like to me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, in the show notes, we have a piece linked over to American Enterprise Institute, the climate change cult. I think it's like 10 warning signs, it says. But, before I read that, Donnie, actually, this is why I've been calling it a cult or a religion. It has all the hallmarks of a religion or a cult. Their beliefs are impervious to
Wait,
reason.
wait. Before you do this,
Did I go through my list?
No, I'm basing the entire show off of this list, so I don't want you to rattle through all of our main points here. But
all right, well,
if you want to give us some general take, that's fine. But I seriously want to go through like point 1, point 2, point 3 for the rest of the episode. So
all right, well, we'll go through them, but I won't go through all these. But I'll just say, but yes, it's obvious. I mean, if you look at the characteristics of a religion or a cult, all of the factors in the climate extremism and the climate cult also apply. I mean, they have belief, and they're impervious to data. You can't convince them of that. You can't just tell them that historically the rise in carbon dioxide follows temperature, not the other way around. If you look back through eons, you could tell them that, and it doesn't have any effect on their belief system. It's a belief system. You can't. It would be as pointless as trying to talk the Pope out of being Catholic. That's where we are with the climate cultists. They're completely impervious to reason.
Yeah. Johnny, I just want to expand real quick on something that Justin said that really caught my attention. Looking back on the trailer, these were all like young people. These were all like hip people. These were all almost Antifa-like, but better looking and actually with normal clothing. But it almost was to me like a recruitment video for this. And then I started to think back, gosh, when I was a kid, I remember there were a bunch of cartoons like Captain Planet and all those kind of things, which was really pushing this stuff. So I wonder if what they're doing now is that they've already got the kids at the younger ages with the planet's going to die and all this kind of stuff, and now they're thinking about the next the next stage of their plan, which is, all right, now we got to radicalize the young people to actually go and do the things that we want them to do. And that's why I was also taken by what Jim said with the Stop Oil and all these movements. It just it just dawned on me that these are all like almost 20 somethings or late teenagers, and they're just completely unaware of the truth and of reality. But I think that this is the the result of a 10, 20, 30-year campaign to radicalize and indoctrinate and brainwash these kids into thinking that the climate is, that climate change is an existential threat. And if they buy that, which I think a lot of them do, just based on the conversation with my friends and, some of my family members, it makes sense that they would say, well, desperate times call for desperate measures. And if it means blowing up a pipeline or blowing up a substation or throwing, paint on a painting to, bring attention or whatever it is, I think that this is their way of justifying that, because in their minds, it's always the ends justify the means.
Yeah, well, after you mentioned that, now I'm having these visions of a reboot of Captain Planet where it's like a hard R, gritty movie.
I'm sorry, I've got the theme song stuck in my head now, and it's gonna annoy me all day.
Oh, that's inevitable. Give it a couple more years. We're gonna have a hard R Captain Planet movie. So yes, Jim, you mentioned I have a piece in the show notes that is from the American Enterprise Institute titled "The Climate Change Cult: 10 Warning Signs." So this is a great piece. It builds upon a post based off of a list of 10 warning signs of unsafe groups developed by an intervention specialist and expert on cults. So that's pretty legit, I guess. So I want to go through the list point by point, and then bring up kind of more recent stories that kind of tie into and kind of support each of these points. So the article that Andy has pulled up right there is a couple of years old. So I want to kind of go through it and kind of update it as we go with more timely examples of stuff. So point number 1, absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. So the original author points to how the leaders of this movement are mostly politicians and celebrities who have no scientific training, that prescribe carbon austerity for you, but themselves live nice and posh lives. So, Jim, you were kind of antsy to get into this list. So, do you have any comments on this first point before I move on any further?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a kind of part of a hallmark of a religion, or could be one of the hallmarks of religion. If you're cynical about it, could be hypocrisy, right? So that, Al Gore gets to live in a 20,000 square foot home because he's a high priest of the climate cult. The rest of us don't get to live that way. In fact, he gets to fly on planes, he gets to be on a motorcade, and all these kind of things. But, that's another hallmark of a bad religion, is that, the high priests and priestesses get to live it up while the rest of us have to atone for our sins. So, yep.
Yeah, or a corruption of some religious faction or something like that. Oh, and by the way, because there's 10 of these and different examples of stuff that I want to sprinkle throughout, I'm not going to go to each one of you for your comments on each one of these 10 points. So I'm just going to pick somebody. And then if you have something to elaborate on, you want to jump in, feel free to do so. I'm not going to cut you off until the very end when we're running out of time. Just an FYI. So number 2. That no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. So this is probably one of the most obvious traits of the climate change cult, since at least as I have been involved in this topic area, I've always heard the same lines. The science is settled. The debate is over, so as long as I've been in this, probably at least 10 years, 12 years, something like that. I haven't been able to debate. That's been off the table for at least 10 to 12 years. Back in 2014, the BBC Trust instructed their journalists to stop giving deniers airtime. Chuck Todd in 2018 opened an episode of Meet the Press stating that he was no longer going to give airtime to deniers. So this is a thing that's pretty rampant. And obviously, this sort of gatekeeping has supercharged in recent years as social media began to weigh in on the matter. And I guarantee you that this video already has a warning label on YouTube because of the subject that we're discussing. And just the other day, TikTok, which is probably the largest growing social media for young people, expanded their misinformation restrictions to include climate misinformation. And obviously, I am no fan of misinformation, but when you start banning quote unquote misinformation, the question immediately is, well, who gets to determine what's misinformation? If we go out there and say wind and solar are insufficient to power a industrialized first world country, is that misinformation? Or is that an opinion, or is that actually a fact that's just being labeled misinformation? So this idea, the no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry, not only has been going on for a long time, but it's getting crazier and crazier. Chris, you know this firsthand. I always bring up how there's certain even friendly publications that won't take any of our climate change stuff because they're afraid that their accounts on social media are going to get limited, throttled because of that content. So what is your thoughts on point 2 of this? Are they a cult?
Well, I definitely believe that there's been a chilling effect throughout the media because they are worried about the consequences if they publish anything that questions, climate dogma. But Donnie, what this reminds me of, and I, think cults are somewhat interesting, and I've watched a lot of documentaries about Jim Jones and David Koresh and a bunch of other cult leaders, and this is so emblematic of what they always resort to. Whenever an outsider, whenever one of the people within the cult question, hey, maybe we should look at this from another way, or maybe there's another answer to this, they're excommunicated. They are just flat out, just annihilated. So there is no room for anyone to question any of the things that are pushed from the top. And I think this is just so part and parcel to climate change, where you can have all the data in the world, you can have all the facts and figures at your disposal, and you can put them, and then it's just an automatic, don't say that, shut up, and we're going to silence you.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that a little bit more too, because there's a couple more points on this list that tie directly to that idea. But point number 3, no meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget expenses, such as independently audited financial statements. So the interconnected web of money from climate groups, the media, subsidies for green projects from the government, greenwashing, it's an incredibly well-financed machine. And I always find it funny that people kind of point at us, the Heartland Institute, as if we're like awash in big oil money, when in reality, especially compared to the green apparatus, we are like a little fly in the face of a woolly mammoth. Like, it's insane how much more money that whole green movement has compared to us lowly working on StreamYard on YouTube plebes over here. But then, as we've exposed in the past couple of years, the ESG scheme is literally warping the entire economy to undergird the climate change movement. Truly an unquantifiable amount of money, power, and influence. Justin, am I overstating things?
No, I mean that's the amount of money behind ESG initiatives, sustainable investment globally is somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 trillion, trillion with a T. That is an insane amount of money that is almost impossible for regular people to wrap their minds around. I mean, the US GDP is something like $20 trillion, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. The average budget, for the US government is, maybe 5-6 trillion, somewhere in that range, depending on the year you're looking at, something like that. I mean, we're talking $100 trillion, right? And so when you have that much money floating around saying we're all going to pour our money into one thing, and we're going to basically refuse to put any of that money, a lot of it public dollars, by the way, pension fund dollars, government dollars, etc., in anything having to do with fossil fuels over the long run. I mean, how do you, if you're a big corporation in any industry, it doesn't matter what you're in, of course you're going to follow that money. You're not going to just sit on your hands and just go bankrupt. You're going to go where the money is going. That's how it works. I mean, you mentioned earlier, just Exxon. I mean, some of these things they make absolutely no sense, right? You mentioned earlier, it's so ironic because whenever anybody talks about this debate, they always make it sound like the people on our side of the debate are rolling in cash. We're all like Scrooge McDucks over here. We got cash everywhere. We have gold swimming pools and we're just having a great time and full of money. And it's all the big oil companies, right? You said that. And that's exactly right. I spent literally 5 seconds Googling this. ExxonMobil, okay? One of the world's largest oil companies. If you look up information about Heartland, you'll get all these people who say ExxonMobil is funneling tons of cash to Heartland. It's not true. They're not. In 2021, Exxon announced plans to invest $15 billion, $15 billion in lower greenhouse gas emissions initiatives over the next 6 years. Since then, this is from 2023, this article, they increased it to $17 billion through 2027, which amounts to $2.8 billion per year. So that's just one oil company. It's an oil company putting $2.8 billion into green initiatives. And we're supposedly the people on our side are the ones flush with oil money cash. It's just like undermining all of that. It's completely, it literally takes 5 seconds to look it up. That's all you have to do. And so I think that now, whether that's tied to a cult or not, does that have something to do with it being a cult? I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily see the connection there, but I do agree that the amount of money behind this and the way that the money, it's not just chasing the best idea or chasing the best product or chasing the best service or chasing the most innovative thing. It's very specifically, we're going to put the money into the green stuff, even if it's more expensive, less efficient, less reliable, has lots of problems, requires us to just, shut down existing forms of technology earlier than they really need to, like power plants or gasoline powered cars or whatever. We're going to just put the money into green stuff regardless of whether it makes any sense financially. There's no doubt about that's happening. And I think it's a huge, massive problem. I would argue that's the primary way, especially in America, that this thing is being rolled out. It's through the financial system, through BlackRock and companies like that. That's where the biggest push is coming from.
Joe Biden just announced this morning that the United States is pledging $1 billion more for the UN's Green Climate Fund. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well,
how much is Heartland's budget, Jim? Is it $1 billion? Is it 2.8 billion? If it is, can I get some of that money? Because I don't, that's a lot. I mean, it's
a little bit south. It's a little bit south of $1 billion. I'll just say it there.
God.
Yeah. No, it's I somebody needs to do some type of like one of those Glenn Beck chalkboard like pictures of where all the money with the green and every subsidies and the green funds, Sierra Club, all of that stuff, and you will be blown away by it. I'm sure. But yeah,
sounds like a good project for the Heartland Institute, as a matter of fact.
I think so. Let's put our intern on it. I think he's listening right now. Start working on that, sir. All right, next one. Unreasonable fear. This is number 4. unreasonable fear about the outside world, such as an impending catastrophe, evil conspiracies, and persecutions. Do I even need to elaborate on this
No.
one? I mean,
We can
come
move on to
on.
the next one.
I think we actually have a nice little highlight package of some of the crazier rhetoric that is spouted routinely across the internet and on just your normal CNNs and MSNBCs of the world. Go ahead and play that video if we have it ready.
My name's Cameron Ford, I'm 31 and I work as a carpenter, and I've locked my neck to a fuel tanker. This is a bit ridiculous really, and the mainstream media are going to do their best to make us look like nutcases.
Oh, they don't have
And
to
that
try
is gonna
very
be the
hard.
message they're peddling, but what is nuts is the government are refusing to listen to the science. If we continue with fossil fuels, then we're not going to have a planet that we can live on.
If we carry on the way we're going, I can't see this civilization lasting the end of this century. No chance, in my view.
If we get it wrong, so if we do the wrong things, then I think there's a very, very big risk that we will just end our civilization. The human species will survive somehow, but we will destroy almost everything we built up over the last 2,000 years. I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure.
It's just so, the path we're on is just so dark. It's so bleak. You know, I see tropics that's uninhabitable by humans because it's too hot. It's too humid and hot. Our bodies couldn't even survive there.
Yeah, no one wants
bodies
to
couldn't survive there.
Right.
Potentially hundreds of millions of people needing to leave that region and go to cooler areas. And
We are, without exaggeration, facing a trajectory and impacts that will obliterate the possibility of human civilization within, by the year 2100. And that is not an exaggeration. And the fact that that is not widely known, that the stakes
It's
are
not
so
widely
extraordinarily high, I think is something that really should cause a lot of people to, from media to scientists to hang their heads in real shame and real horror.
These tipping points have the possibility. They certainly put forward the risk of a fate that could take the climate, the Earth system, out of our control into conditions that would be an existential threat to us.
Everybody on the planet now needs to be galvanized to tackling climate change, because it is by far the most important and biggest emergency that mankind has ever faced.
I mean, Jim, you could argue that like comparing, these different attributes of a cult to, an organization, you could stretch it and make certain things sound like what this attribute, this 0.4, right? Unreasonable fear about the world impending catastrophe. You can compare this to the most outlandish cults out there. The idea that there is a comet coming, we're all going to die. We all have to drink the Kool-Aid type of a thing because we're going to be risen up to whatever the master ship or something like that. Like, this is on par with that. Like, I don't care what you say, but I mean, you've seen this rhetoric longer than I have. I mean, this is pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm the one who grabbed those video clips, and we could have filled hours and hours and hours of people getting a prominent place to speak and talking about how humans are doomed. I mean, when we talk about this subject, obviously a lot here on this podcast and on the Climate Change Roundtable show, which is on Fridays at the same time, 1:00 Eastern, on our Heartland Institute YouTube channel. But it's these look in their eyes. When you watch these people, that's the kind of thing that struck me. It's like I can almost see the spirals in their eyes. They are hypnotized. They really believe this stuff. Like a professor believes that Earth will not be inhabitable by humans by the end of the century. That poor guy, that younger fella, talking about how humans will not be able to, it'll be so hot and humid in the tropics that humans will not be able to survive there. I mean, does he really think that the daily high temperature, say in the Amazon rainforest, is going to be like 150 degrees Fahrenheit? I mean, this is absolute lunacy. And again, that's a telltale sign that you are in a cult. You start babbling absolute nonsense. And these people are certifiable. A part of me really, if they hadn't moved policy globally down a very dark and terrible path, I'd almost feel sympathy for these people, because they have been brainwashed. They are not thinking people. They are automatons who are moving at the direction of the cult leaders in the world right now. And I'd almost feel sorry for them if the policies that they demand we do right now weren't so destructive to the human condition.
Justin, we know that this isn't just some like fringe, group of just like these, 12 people that we showed in this montage. We've done polling that asks people that are viewers of CNN and MSNBC. I forgot the exact numbers, but it was like, how long does like humanity have, if climate change is left like unabated? And correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you remember it better than I do, but it was like a quarter. It was like 25% of like CNN viewers thought that we had between like 10 and 20 years or something like that to live. Like it's some like large percentage of the population. It's wild stuff.
Yeah, I mean they've done a lot of studies about sort of climate catastrophist views in various countries and things like that. We've done polling on that in the United States with likely voters, and over and over and over again, they show, actually, as crazy as the climate stuff is in America, Americans are far less likely to buy into it than people in a lot of other countries. I mean, there are countries in the world where it's more than 50% of people think that we're on a course toward the end of human civilization, like more than half the population. I mean, can you imagine living in a society where 1 out of every 2 people, at least, thinks humanity is probably not going to exist in 100 years? Like, it just probably won't happen. Like, can you imagine like what kind of a place that is? I mean, like that kind of stuff is just, it has infected. And what's amazing about it too is, the same people who've made this kind of argument, and this is also, I think you could, this is maybe not so much a cult thing as much as it is, you see this probably more so with a more organized religion that's moved beyond just cult. It's like the perpetual new thing, right? It's this prediction didn't work out, so there's another prediction. I mean, you can go back 60, 70 years and find all sorts of things, catastrophes, things that are going to wipe us out. I mean, we've talked about this a bunch of times, like the population control thing, right? Like we're going to have a population boom. We're not going to be able to feed everybody. The global cooling thing was a big thing in the 70s. You have global warming, you have the ozone layer, you have Y2K, you have like all these different, but just sticking even to environmentalist things, pollution in the atmosphere, right? The blue fog thing that, what's his name at Stanford was all into. Like this has been, and none of it happens. It never happens. Like all the predictions they claim are going to happen don't happen.
Well, no, yeah, you're right. It's like in the cult where they're like, oh, we interpreted, the scriptures and it comes up with this date. And then that date comes and passes. Right, like, oh, we messed it up. Now we reinterpreted it. And now it's a later date. It's the same thing with this. It's like, oh, we ran the models and this is the date. Oh, and then that date comes and passes. Oh, wait, we ran the models wrong. We got to do it again.
Right. And it really is like that. I mean, I remember, and this is where experience, I think, actually does have some benefit. One of the things that my dad is a good conservative guy. He's been a conservative for forever. And I remember when I was younger, I was always pretty conservative, but I remember when I was younger, college age or so, I was worried about climate change. That was something I was worried about. And I thought, I don't know, I'm sure we can figure out some kind of free market, way of dealing with this or whatever. We don't have to give all the power to government in order to deal with it. But all the scientists say this is the case. This is how I thought. Right. And so we need to do something about it. And I remember my dad, who does not know anything about science, but said, look, I understand that there are a lot of people out there saying this, but I've been through this like 4 times in my life already. Like I remember all the other things. And I'm telling you, don't trust these people because they're not trustworthy people. And that was the basis of it. It wasn't, well, I'm going to go do the science. It was the same people who told me when I was in high school that, the world was about to end. And then when I was, in my 20s, and then when I was in my 30s and just having kids, and then when I was in my 40s just starting my business, one crisis after another, it never happened. And so, and every single time the solution is some kind of big government action that gives them and their friends more power and money every single time. Don't believe it. And sure enough, he loves to rub it in my face. Later on, I came to the conclusion that, Dad was right. And it's like, he didn't need to be a scientist because he understood the history of it. And younger people don't have that advantage. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
When you're 20, you don't remember. You don't even know that the global cooling thing was a thing, or the population control thing was a thing, or the ozone layer thing was a thing. You don't know any of that. And so if all you're being told is that this is a crisis, the science is settled, don't listen to the crazy people funded by oil, then yeah, you're gonna believe it. But again, it's like the organized religion that only talks about the end of the world that's about to come and never mentions the fact that they made like 15 other predictions for the end of the world that never happened.
Right.
Like that's where we're at right now with these people.
Chris, I want to throw the next one to Jim, but before I do you have any comments on this particular point?
Well, cults thrive on fear, and they always have to have a boogeyman. And they have chosen their boogeyman, and it's quote climate change, and it's anyone who's for greenhouse gas emissions and fossil fuel uses. So it makes total sense to me.
Yeah, it really is the perfect boogeyman, because it's not something that could like easily be just like dealt with, right? It's like, oh, climate change. I just saw a story that was talking about some like new microbe that they found in some volcano that like consumes CO2, and it was like, oh, this could be a solution or something. I don't know. There's probably not.
And Danny, that's such a great point, because then it can also change. It can shift, like Justin just described. Yeah. And I actually had the same experience with my father. How in the 60s it was, global cooling, and then it was global warming, and now it's climate change, and it's just they're constantly shifting back and forth.
Yeah, and if it was easily dealt with, like, oh, we just released this new microbe that we found into the atmosphere and we'll be fine, it would not be a big enough boogeyman to justify any of these things that they've been prescribing over the last couple of decades. But Jim, the next couple kind of go hand in hand, so I'm just going to group these up for the sake of time. Number 5, there is no legitimate reason to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving, negative or even evil. And number 6, former members often relate the same stories of abuse and reflect a similar pattern of grievances. So like I said, I think that you can speak to this one better than I have, considering that you've been in this field a little bit longer than I have. We do know that people like Judith Curry or Michael Schellenberger are treated when they leave the cult, or at least have leave the cult, or at least don't walk lockstep with the movement. I'm sure you have a lot more examples in the holster of people that were kind of believers of the cult and then have since left and been excommunicated like that. But your thoughts on these 2 points?
Well, yeah, I immediately thought of Michael Schellenberger, and we had him on this podcast, about a year and a half ago, when he wrote his book, basically.
Apocalypse Never. That's
right, Apocalypse Never, because he looked at the data. Rare among people who are, I guess maybe Michael Schellenberger was never really in the climate cult per se. I think a lot of people are, you're just passively, you're just living life. You are just inundated with information and propaganda, I should say, that human activity is causing a catastrophic, is going to cause catastrophe on Earth. It'll be, as we showed in that montage, uninhabitable. Joe Biden says every time he talks about the climate, John Kerry says the same thing. It's an existential threat to humanity. And if you're just passively living your life, you're just inundated with this propaganda all the time. And I think Michael Schellenberger was one of those people. I mean, he was politically a liberal on the left. And like many, people who called themselves liberals maybe 10, 15 years ago, he realized, he looked around and everybody was suddenly a super hard leftist, and he was wondering what happened to everybody. What happened to everybody was, part of it is the climate cult, is that leftists see climate as their avenue for gaining the control and the political power that they've been unable to get for a long time. And so Michael Schellenberger is under constant attack now by the left. It was really funny when people who were maybe cult adjacent is a better way to put it. When they escape, when they kind of come over and they look over at an organization like the Heartland Institute, and we say, "Hey there, buddy, good to see you." And they go, "God, now I'm getting attacked the way you guys are." It's like, That's right. And it's because it doesn't matter whether you were a former leftist or used to be in the cult. In fact, that's even worse, because you've left them. You've spurned them. but they see everybody in the out group is evil. Again, that's an aspect of religion, is that you have to have sin, and you have to have, and there, of course, if you have sin, you have sinners. Now, most Christian sects, or Christianity for the most part, has the idea that you hate the sin, but you love the sinner. The climate cult hates the sin of just living your life the way you want to, or driving an SUV, and they also hate the sinner. And so that's what's kind of dangerous about this, and that's why it's much more cult-like than religion-like.
Yeah. Number 7.
Hold on, before we get to that real quick, the best example, really one of the best examples in modern history is Michael Moore. Michael Moore didn't even give up the idea that climate change is a catastrophe, but he dared to produce a movie directed by Jeff Gibbs called what was it? Planet of the Humans.
Yeah, Planet of the Humans.
Planet of the Humans, that presents the idea that just the renewable energy part of the issue is actually all garbage. It isn't really going to do the things that it claims it will. It's not really going to cut down on, it has all sorts of environmental problems, and it doesn't do what everyone claims that it will do. And he agreed with everything else. He just disagreed with that one part,
right?
And that was enough to, burn him at the stake. Like, get this guy out of here.
Right. They took it off of YouTube. They took the video off of YouTube.
Yeah. He was and he's not just like some guy, like Michael Schellenberger was a big deal prior to his most recent thing, but not anywhere near like Michael Moore. I mean, Michael Moore was a saint-like figure in the left for 2 decades. And then all of a sudden he's out. He's a monster. I don't know what happened to him. He got bought off by oil companies. Get this guy out of here. And now he's like nobody. He's just trash to these people now. It's unbelievable how fast.
Good point. I haven't seen him, and he's hard to miss.
He's gone. I know.
Boom.
Patrick Moore, another great example. The founder of Greenpeace Canada, I
that's
believe.
Right.
Yeah. Right. All right. Number 7. There are records, books, news articles, or television programs that document the abuses of the group/leader. I wasn't exactly sure what this one was trying to say, but I think it does kind of relate to the previous 2 points. But I'll go even kind of further into just the absurd standards that they hold people to, which, you guys already just touched on. But, a couple more points to add to yours, Justin, is like there was examples of like Dianne Feinstein, right? Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi, some of the most like progressive people in Congress that were like backed into corners in the Capitol building by a bunch of indoctrinated children about their stances on the Green New Deal and other type of, crazy leftist solutions to stuff. It's like if Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi aren't green enough for you, then like you should consider yourself more on the fringe elements of stuff.
How dare you?
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was going to say I have a slightly different take on this. From what I read, it was actually like the leaders. So if you want to say Al Gore or John Kerry or Barack Obama or quote the leaders, they're not doing what they say they do. So we've all said, do as I say, not as I do, the hypocrites and all that. But I think that this is another thing that is so part and parcel to cults, where David Koresh was, saying, "Oh, I'm Jesus," but he's actually, a terrible person who's, having sex with like 15-year-old girls, or the guy at Nexium, where he's saying, "Oh, I know everything about the entire world," but actually he's doing all this bad stuff behind the scenes. So one of the things about cult leaders is they use their their religion, or they use whatever that is they're pushing to allow them to give them cover to do really bad things behind the scenes. And I think that that's one of the things that these climate hypocrites are doing. They're saying all the good stuff to the press and to their Hollywood friends and to their friends in academia, but then behind the scenes they're completely acting differently.
Yeah, or the protesters. I mean, you brought up the Just Stop Oil. I think Jim mentioned it. Maybe Chris mentioned it. I don't know. The Just Stop Oil people that we've talked about a number of times in the past that will deface art in museums, or glue themselves to the roads, or climb on top of trains during rush hour when people are trying to get home, because, the idea that you're just living your life and not paying attention to this crisis that's coming down to us, like that's unacceptable. Like, this is the most extreme extreme version of like the Jehovah Witness coming to your door and soliciting their message to you. It's like you can't even go home in peace without us.
But one thing that's interesting about the climate cult is the leaders and the followers both don't actually follow the rules that they are saying everyone else has to follow. Versus, most cults, if you're a follower, you are following the rules. It's the leader who doesn't have to follow the rules. The leader just makes the rules up as they go along. But in this situation, you've got the leaders and the followers not actually following the rules, having a bumper sticker on their, giant SUV saying, "Oh, I care about the planet," while they're taking vacations to Hawaii and they've got mansions all over the place and stuff. So I think this is actually both the followers and the leaders are saying a good game, but their actions do not back up their words. But then they point the finger at everyone else who says, "Hey, we don't believe in it. We don't want nothing to do with this." No, you actually have to follow the rules that we set that we don't follow. It's so annoying.
I was thinking about the Just Stop Oil people, and then they had like a rash of different stories that came out a couple of months ago, and then I was like, oh, they've been kind of quiet recently. I haven't seen them very much. And then, like, seriously, the day after I had that thought, a story came out about a Just Stop Oil protester that ruined the championship game of called snooker. It's kind of like pool.
It's a billiards game, yes.
Just for, people on the other side of the ocean, apparently. So we have a video of that here. This championship game going on. And, oh, look at this guy. Hops up on the table and destroys the table with a bag of orange powder. And then he sits there because he thinks that he's some type of, hero for bringing attention to this cause. And then he's quickly dragged away by his security guards. Jim, you saw this simultaneously, same time as I did, and sent it my way. So thoughts on this?
I did. Yeah, well, actually, I was looking around for. I like to find clips on Twitter. They're easier that way. You can just put in some search terms and then hit video and maybe it'll show up. And so I put Just Stop Oil protest, and every video for like days was this protest at the snooker tournament. Look, Europeans, especially Britons, take their snooker very seriously, and this is a big deal. But I also came across a video, and I didn't cut it, but came across a video. There were these two guys standing on top of a commuter train somewhere in England to stop it, because I guess, wait, I thought the climate cultists insisted we give up our personal transportation and use public transportation. And then they get on top of the train to stop public transportation from happening. And these were electric trains, by the way. And so the two guys were on top of the train. They finally got a hold of the guy's leg, pulled him down, and started beating the hell out of him. I felt sorry for the guy, but these are working class guys, commuters trying to get home, trying to go about their life, and just Stop Oil guys are stopping them from going about their lives. So they pulled him off the train and started punching him. So, but these cultists, they think all of this is worth it. You are not. You're so indoctrinated that the idea that others could just live their lives the way they want to, the idea that other people like you and me just want to be left alone. You can have your views, you can express them, but just don't interfere with my life. And they feel so morally superior that, doing something like ruining a snooker tournament. Or there was last year, French Open, I'm a big tennis fan. A woman ran during the semifinals, ran onto the court and connected her neck to the net and had to be dragged off. I mean, these people think nothing of disturbing your life, because what is that? What is a little inconvenience, guys, when you're trying to save the planet?
Right. Yeah, we're already at like the 58-minute mark. I still have a few things to go, so I think we're gonna go a little bit long. So if we get some support in the chat there, then we'll definitely
should we go long or not?
Yeah. But number 8.
So the one episode where I'm standing the whole episode is the one where you decide to go long.
Let's go 2
Every
hours.
other episode you cut. It doesn't matter what's going on. You cut it off right at an hour. But the one time I don't have a chair, you decide, you know what? Let's go 30 extra minutes on this one.
30.
Screw you, Donnie.
60 extra minutes. Keep going. Here we go.
Justin, I know you're a busy man, so if you need to hop off or get a chair or something like that,
away.
Feel free. But all right, number 8, followers feel they can never be, quote, good enough. So this, I think, is best exemplified by a never-ending stream of proposals and regulations and restrictions that come from top down usually. And we've talked about a million examples on the show, everything from light bulb restrictions to calls for people to start eating bugs as a part of their diets when it comes to protein consumption. But I've got two new ones for you. One is out of New York City. Mayor Eric Adams is looking to reduce his constituents' carbon footprint by having the city stop buying meat in its various jurisdictions. This includes for school lunches, food that's purchased for hospitals or any other kind of state-run facilities. So, if you're living in New York City and you happen to be in the hospital, maybe your wife just gave birth to a kid, and you're looking through the menu or something like that, you're going to be less likely to be able to find a hamburger. And again, it's all in the name of climate change. So isn't that fantastic, everybody? And then the second one, and this one was kind of crazy to me. I didn't hear about this. In London, they have a program. I don't know when this initially started, but it's called ULEZ, or Ultra Low Emissions Zones. And it's being expanded, I think, in August. So the program uses cameras to track and find vehicles that emit too much carbon emissions, whatever, in these zones. So it started off as one specific area. Now it's expanding, and surely it'll stop there and not expand further and further, inevitably incorporating the entire city. Surely that won't be the case. But we've talked about the idea of they're coming for your meat and they're coming for your internal combustion vehicles, right? These are two examples of just the past couple of weeks of exactly that type of thing. Justin, since you're standing, you want to comment on either of these stories or the larger point?
No.
How dare you?
I'm going to move this. I'm going to move
this is a protest.
I'm going to move this.
He's going to throw. He's going to throw orange paint on.
I'm going to come to your house and glue myself to the front door so that you can't get out. Look. I think that there's this great Star Wars quote talking about the Sith, who are, the evil bad guys in the Star Wars universe. Only the Sith deal in absolutes, right? Only they deal in the absolute. Only they are the ones who say it's either all or nothing. You either do exactly this, or it's the end of the world. And that is this is how this whole conversation has evolved now, right? It's either we absolutely go 100% in the direction of these lunatics gluing themselves to things, or we're all going to die, right? Like these are the choices. This is how they've set it all up. And if that's not, I mean, that is, I don't want to say that's a sort of hallmark of religion, but there is an element of religion that says, right, that if you don't do, you're either in or you're out, right? You're either going to hell or you're going to heaven. That's a part of religion in a lot of religions. And it seems like this is 100% part of it. I think a better example of, and there's people just riddled with guilt because of that, because they aren't absolutists. No one actually in Western civilization can be an absolutist. And so they're riddled with that guilt. I think one of the best examples of it was, you mentioned it earlier, you alluded to it earlier, that NBC News confess your climate sins thing, where it's like people riddled with guilt coming on to talk about on this website where they anonymously post these just the saddest things that you've ever heard in your entire life. And you just think like, I just go to the website, right? This is one of the top ones. It's still there. The website's still open.
Yeah.
This is one of the people who posted, I still eat red meat. I have been trying to like beans for 10 years.
Oh, no.
That's it. Working on buying less and less. This is another one. I'm 66. I buried my husband last year, but I kept buying food for him. Grieving is strange.
Oh, my God.
Like, I'm sorry, but how is that not? It's so incredibly sad.
Yes.
It's so incredibly sad. I mean, another person, I am writing my confession on a cell phone that's made of plastic. I feel guilty about that. Like, these people are, it is, and and this is why it's so tragic that children who don't understand all of this and aren't being given all of the evidence,
right?
It's so sad that they have been drawn into this, and they're at the point now where, and this is why you see more and more younger people being radicalized by this idea. They truly believe the world's about to end, and the psychological effect that has on kids and everything else. It's just what we're in store for in the future is truly terrifying because of that being in the core of all of these children's psyches for years and years and years. If that's not religious, I don't know what is. People still talk about Catholic guilt who left the Catholic Church 50 years ago. Like it's like that in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, this is all downstream for that. What was it? Point number 2, where it's like, they won't allow for any word of like inquiry or whatever, right? They won't allow the other side of the debate to be heard or something like that. So when you're only hearing the one side, or the idea that the Heartland Institute is going to put out a book that has a bunch of different facts that kind of reveal the other side of this ledger here, that's super controversial. It's like, well, what do you expect these kids to come out of school thinking? Like, they're not going to have a holistic view of this subject. They're only going to have this one side of the ledger that's all doom and gloom. So yeah, it is terribly sad. And I've talked to previous episodes about how this type of indoctrination is causing people to choose how they're going to live and whether or not they're going to reproduce and have kids. Like, that is an incredibly personal decision to have, and it's being altered or being twisted by people like AOC talking on Instagram about whether or not we should have kids because of the climate in the future. It's twisted, it's sad, and it's kind of frightening, honestly.
I've made the point in the past that about the climate cult, and it's, for instance, like is the mayor of New York City actually in the climate cult? Is John Kerry actually in the climate cult? I think you can argue either way, but I tend to think no, that the people that are in positions of power are exploiting. They've helped create and they're exploiting the climate cult. They're the foot soldiers out there to help lay the groundwork for more government control. And one of their favorite tactics, one of my favorite blogs is Ace of Spades, and Ace wrote this on a lot of topics a couple of years ago, but the left and the people in control, the people that want to control your life, first they'll say that this isn't happening, and then they'll say it's also great that it's happening, and they'll almost say it at the same time, because that's what so now New York City is going to ban meat. People like us on this podcast are saying, look, they're going to make you eat the bugs, they're going to take your meat away. No, we're not. Boom, out comes New York City saying, I guess we're just not going to use meat anymore. We can't do that because we have to save the planet. They did this with gas appliances. We actually had a podcast on that very topic, on this very podcast, saying they're coming for your gas stoves. No, we're not. Boom. Actually, they are. And you see the regulations. You can't have I think New York City, they've either proposed it or they've passed it, and California, the same thing. All new construction, not allowed to have any gas stoves anymore. They did it for fireplaces. Now they're doing it with vehicles, light bulbs, toilets, shower heads, farming in Sri Lanka and Holland. You can't use fertilizer anymore. Every time climate realists warn about this stuff, we're laughed off by the the people in power. That's crazy conspiracy theory stuff, while almost simultaneously implementing those very policies. So the gaslighting, we see it, but the climate cultists actually helped lay the groundwork for that kind of gaslighting.
Right, and they'll never admit that they were wrong when they said, like, oh no, we're not coming for your meat. And then in the future, when they actually are, like, oh, we were wrong then. No. They'll never
admit that they were wrong. They were lying. Not that they were wrong. No, sure. I mean, that's a very important point to make. It's not that they were I hear wrong, you. But they were saying something knowing that the opposite was true to try to prevent, an outcry from people like us. And then in the meantime, they're actually behind the scenes
to make us look crazy. Oh yeah. Behind the scenes, we're coming after your food. Okay, sure. Right. Well, it ties perfectly into point 9, which is the group/leader is always right. So, they've never admit that they were ever wrong. Even when the evidence is stacked against them, they'll continue to parrot the same exact talking points, even if those talking points are completely contradictory. Climate change is causing drought. It's also causing floods. And climate change is causing there to be no snow. People aren't even going to know what snow is anymore. Oh, in California, there's more snow than ever. It's climate change. So if something happens, it's climate change's fault. The science is settled. I don't think we have to belabor that point anymore. I do want to get to this.
I think Paul Ehrlich is the shining embodiment of that. For the past 60 years, this guy has just been proven wrong and wrong again and again and again. And somehow, some way, earlier this year, he was on 60 Minutes.
Exactly.
Plugging his new, the world is going to end panic.
No, don't you guys understand? The priests and priestesses of the climate cult are infallible. They can be, there's no such thing as a contradiction. Whatever they say is law. Whatever they say is truth. And if it contradicts the truth from before, don't worry about that. This is the truth now. And so, yeah, that's, again, a cult-like attribute.
Number 10, last one, Justin. The group leader is the exclusive means of knowing the truth or receiving validation. No other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. I mean, this ties back to some of the other points that we've already made. Science is settled. There is no debate to be had. So I already know what Jim's answer is. This is a climate cult. But Justin, what's the verdict? What do you think?
I think the furthest left faction of it is a cult. I would say that there are a lot of people who are kind of in the middle of the Democratic Party sort of machine establishment. They're and their environment, they're pro-environment is how they see themselves, and they don't really know much about this. Generally, they don't think they actually believe we're all going to die. They don't live their lives that way. But so I wouldn't say that they're in the cult. I would say that they're just, they're part of there's only two parties to be in, and they see themselves in one of those two parties. And so they're kind of in it and they're sympathetic to it maybe, but they're not really in the cult. It's kind of like people who go to church because of the coffee and the parties and stuff, but they don't actually really believe anything that's being taught, and it's just kind of they only go to church on Christmas or something, right?
Yeah,
like those kind of people.
There was an organization that I attended that had some really good Kool-Aid, but luckily I didn't go to their last meeting. So so I think that calling this movement a cult doesn't really do it justice. I don't even think that it goes far enough. What climate change is, and Chris kind of already mentioned this, it's the ultimate justification for ultimate control over the economy and society. Socialists and other central planners used to believe that capitalism was going to lead to increased levels of poverty, and that poverty was going to give them more justification to take control and centrally plan the economy and society. And it didn't pan out. Living standards increased, large middle class formed, and by the 1980s, people were more concerned with buying new gadgets than taking on the bourgeoisie. So climate change became the new boogeyman. And capitalism is making people wealthier, sure, but it's destroying the planet. And because of this, we need more control and to centrally plan the economy. And some of the worst government actions and overreaches of the past 15 years have been in the name of climate change. ESG is justified primarily by climate change. So that's kind of my final thoughts on all of this. I'm curious of what everyone in the comments think about any of the points that we've made here. Are we stretching? Are we not going far enough? Do you have any other examples of some of the points that we've been trying to hammer home here? Chris, final thoughts on this episode.
Yeah, so here's how I view this. I think that the climate change movement has cultist tendencies to it, but I do not think that the vast majority of the people who quote say they believe in climate change are part of a cult, because just like I said, like the Branch Davidians, that's a good example of a cult. And what did they do? Their actions were backed their thoughts. They believed that David Koresh was the second coming, and they were going to live and die under what he said, and they did. These people, they say that they believe in all this stuff, but then when you actually say, well, are your actions backing that up? Like, are you living off the grid? Do you buy things that are fossil fuel based? It's like, yeah. But I still kind of want to be on the good side. So I don't think that these people are cultists in the classic sense of the word. I think a lot of it is their self-preservation. And they think, for whatever reason, that I kind of have to go along with this stuff, because if I don't, I'm going to be ostracized and I'm going to, look like a weirdo and all this kind of stuff. So I think they really go along with it. But I do believe in 10 years or so, if the rubber really meets the road and these policies, okay, you got to give up your gas car you have to give up your air conditioning, and you can only set your thermostat to like 80. I think the overwhelming majority of Americans, at least, would say, no way. I'm not on board with this. So when you ask them like, hey, do you believe in climate change? Yeah, I do. But okay, so are you actually going to put your money where your mouth is? Are you going to do the things that the people of this cult want you to do? I think the vast majority of them are like, no way. And I think that the data backs that up, because when you ask people, okay, would you be willing to spend an extra 10, 20 bucks a month to help prevent climate change? They're like, no. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of this is, bi-coastal liberals who say one thing, but don't really have to actually do it. And then the people, in the flyover country where we're located, thank God, I think that they're much more common sense, and they're just like, this stuff is crazy. Like, no.
It's like one of those distribution patterns where you've got like the cap that are the people that are like quote unquote in the cult, and then there's the other people that you're describing that fall kind of on either side of that in those lower levels. But those are the people that those cult leaders want to bring higher to the top. They're at the level 1 of the reformed neo-Buddhism, and they need to be up to level 2.
And one more quick thing, to the Jim Jones thing is a really interesting example, because a lot of the people didn't want to drink the Kool-Aid. So what did they do? They had people force them and they injected it in them, or they just murdered them. So a lot of the people, once they were like, wait a second, this guy really wants us to commit mass suicide, like, hell no, and they tried to flee, what happened to them? Jim Jones and his like his captains were like, no, you're going down with us.
I think sweet shoes though. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I think that there's a really important thing that we need to keep in mind, and this is why Michael Moore was ostracized from the community, right? Is that there is a lot of people who actually believe that they almost think that there's really no reason not to do it, that there are really no downsides to it, because they think that all these green energy plans and all of the stuff is going to be, it's just as affordable as other energy. In fact, they're being told that it's more affordable to have wind and solar now than it is to have traditional fossil fuels. They think that there's going to be lots of jobs created, millions of jobs created by it. And so a lot of these people actually look at it and say, wait a minute, so climate change is a crisis, but we can fix the crisis. And all we have to do is switch our energy sources to wind and solar. And that's going to create millions of jobs, and it's going to be more affordable. Why wouldn't we do that? Right? Sure. Like, why wouldn't we do that? And then what the Bernie Sanders of the world will get up and say when you say, well, why isn't this happening if it's just such a great deal, is they'll say, well, because there's all this corruption with corporations and the oil companies are buying off, and there's misinformation from like the Heartland Institute type groups. and that's why it isn't happening. And it's like, I don't even think that that's even slightly cultish for those people to believe it. They're just looking at it like, oh, wait a minute, I don't understand this. You're telling me millions of jobs will be created. We can avert this climate change problem, whatever that is. I don't know, but we can avert it. And, it's going to save us money too. Like, of course, this is common sense. Of course we should do this. And there's just a lot of people who fall into that camp as well.
Sure. This makes sense. But you could be like, oh yeah, all I have to do is hang out at this compound and put on these cool shoes and drink this Kool-Aid, and I get to ascend to some alien megaship or something like that. Great, why wouldn't I do this? So you're just describing someone that's super indoctrinated to all of this. But anyways, I'm trying to give your feet a rest. Jim, I want to give you final words. On this episode, we're already 17 minutes long. This is the first time we've gone this long on this show. So take us home, Jim.
Just to surf on something that Chris had said about you ask people, polls show that would you pay an extra $20 a month to fight climate change? And they say, no, I wouldn't do that. Here's the trouble, though. We don't get to vote on it. These climate mitigating measures that are completely unnecessary and reduce your freedom and reduce your quality of life, and make us all poorer and more miserable. We're not going to have a lot of input on that sort of stuff. It's just going to be implemented. That's why you can't that's why you can't build a new home in California and put a gas stove in it. That's why very soon in California, you won't be able to buy a regular Honda Accord, for instance, that's powered by gasoline. You're going to have to buy, if you want a new car, you're going to have to buy an electric vehicle. That's the thing about this that is dangerous. Is that all of this is happening fast, and they actually are going to dismantle the current energy system in this country. They don't care. And because that's going to be easier for them to control you. And so this has to be pushed back on it. It's not enough just to say, well, no, I wouldn't pay an extra $20 a month to fight climate change. You're not going to have a choice. And it's going to be a lot more than $20 a month. So that's what's so dangerous about this. And the people in power are exploiting the power of the cultists in our culture to take more control over our lives. To Marxism, as it always goes.
Yep, absolutely. There was even more stories that we could have gotten into. Maybe they're going to be talking about some of this stuff on the Climate Change Roundtable, Heartland's show on Fridays at noon Central Time. There was one story that I saw about a Chinese firm that is going to be potentially entering a $10 billion deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan to be able to unlock some of their lithium reserves. So that was a crazy story that we didn't have time to get to today. But we're going to be talking about all types of crazy stuff next week. So I want to thank you all for joining us for this week's episode of the In the Tank podcast. Join us next week. Like I said, Thursdays at noon Central Time is where we are streaming this live. You could jump in the conversation, whether or not it's on Facebook or YouTube or Rumble or Twitter, and throw your comments in there. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Also, if you would like, you can leave a review for us on iTunes. That'd be greatly appreciated. If you're not following us on YouTube already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Sharing this content, hitting the like button, or even leaving a comment under the video all helps break through those big tech algorithms and prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Also, if you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. Or you can send us your comments and suggestions to the show by emailing us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Heartland Inst on Twitter, at Jay Lakely on Twitter. I did that backwards. And always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. And Justin Haskins, before you collapse like at the end of a marathon run, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook, Parler, Twitter, Getter, and everywhere else where you can find people. White pages.
Does Parler still exist?
You know.
I don't think Parler exists.
Actually, Parler is on the way out, I believe. I think it is. It's on the way out, but I'm still there.
Yeah, turn out the lights on your way out the door there, Justin. You'll be the last one.
I'm still there. So if you're interested, go to parler.com and see if it's still functioning. And at Justin T. Haskins.
Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
Heartland.org. Always go check it out. We got so much great stuff up there.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.